Hey, this is Dr. Greg Ellis. I want to continue my discussion about the value of physical activity in weight control and in the prevention of the continuing growth of the obesity epidemic. Now, we have to look at the work of Gary Taubes again in his book, Why We Get Fat, to get a perspective on what people are saying about the issue of physical activity. Now, the World Health Organization, among other professional organizations, has said that we're getting more sedentary. Gary argues with that point. He writes, but the evidence suggests the opposite. Now, here comes the evidence, his evidence. Certainly in the United States, where the obesity epidemic has coincided with what we might call an epidemic of leisure time physical activity, of health clubs, and of innovative means of expending energy in line skating, mountain biking, step and elliptical machines. So this is his position, that people are doing all these physical activities, and he relies on the New York Times, as a journalist would, for his facts. They reported in 1977, he writes, that the United States was then in the midst of an exercise explosion. Well, I have been in the exercise business my whole life. I started working out when I was 8. I opened my first gym in 1972 and kept expanding that and have been in it ever since. And I've got a lot of friends who have been the managers and owners of health clubs. We all know that very few people are working out. They just aren't doing it. Less than 15% of the population belongs to a health club, and maybe 6% of that group uses the health club on any regular basis. They just aren't working out. Health clubs have known this. They've known this for 40 years. So what the big chains do is they sign people to long-term contracts, 2-year contracts, and then they extract the money from their bank account every month, whether it's $20 or $90 or $100. States have passed laws to prevent these health clubs from doing this because they were just ripping people off because people weren't using the club. They did not go. One time when I was still a student in Pittsburgh and I worked for the European Health Spa, some of the members organized that they wanted to get all the membership out to the club at the same time. And they got a list of the members and they called them and they organized this great day at the health club. The number of people who came to this was absolutely amazing. And they more or less shut the facility down. But of course, they didn't come back again. So we all know this. All the guys that work in the health club business know that people aren't working out. Now, I live in a suburban community and I walk around the streets. I hardly ever see anyone out there. Hardly ever. This guy I walk with who's 85, he's in a senior facility. He tells me no one's working out over there. And I know they're not. They're just sitting in their chairs. The people who are already in wheelchairs stay in wheelchairs. They don't even try and get up. And even though they can walk, they don't bother. We actually had an instance where we were in a nursing home and I was doing fall prevention work. And we made something called an ankle-foot orthotic. This supports the foot and the ankle, makes the leg stronger, improves the balance. We put these on a woman who'd been wheelchair bound for 6 months. She got up in the walker and out the dining room and down the hallway she went. Everybody's standing there with their mouths open. They couldn't believe it. Later on, I heard that she got back in the wheelchair because she decided moving around was too much work. She would rather just sit. So don't let anybody ever give you the impression that we're not getting more sedentary. The average man around 100 years ago walked about 10 miles a day. Average woman about 7. That's a lot of walking. And we, of course, didn't have an obesity epidemic back then, as we do now. So there's no question that we're more sedentary, and we're losing the activity. So we replace 7 miles of walking a day with 30 minutes of aerobics 3 times a week. That's been the trade-off. There has not been a fitness explosion. There has actually been a fitness implosion. And that's why we're having so much problem with obesity. So despite what Gary says, people are not exercising more, they're exercising far less. Now, we know how much exercise you have to do to help prevent weight gain. It's about 70 to 80 minutes of moderate activity a day, most days of the week, and that will help. But people aren't getting that. They're not doing that. They're not getting out there. Now, I think people should do something that I call spontaneous physical activity. They just got to get up from their desk and go move for 5 minutes and just do that for a number of periods throughout the day. But they aren't even doing that. So we've got a massive increase in the amount of people who are simply inactive every day, and that is, in fact, leading to an increase in obesity. There's no question about it. And this lack of physical activity is also going to lead to the occurrence of a lot of degenerative diseases. So society as a whole is just falling apart. You know, the last year in my life, I was writing a book. I mean, a really long, detailed book, and it took a lot of work. This was the glycation factor, and I just was not as physically active as I'm used to being. Probably the least amount of physical activity I've taken since I was about 20. And I can feel it. I know I can turn things back on in 90 days, and I intend to. But we're working on this program here now, and this has all taken a great deal of time, and they just don't have it. But Gary tells us wrong. The lack of physical activity is leading to the obesity epidemic. And the facts are, which I've already presented, that if you do increase your physical activity, it will not increase your hunger and your appetite, as he alleges. That's his main point, that all exercise will do is make you hungry. That's simply not true. So I don't know where he's getting his fact, but I know where I get mine. I go do research in the medical and scientific libraries and online, and I get these papers, and I know how to read them, and I know how to interpret them. So these are the facts that you need to know. I'm Dr. Greg Ellis.